Hey guys, this is a video on how to generate a human face based on some general proportional rules, okay? So the end product is going to look something like what you see in the middle over here, and I'll be referring back to this example throughout the video to point out some specific measurements that we can approximate here, okay? Materials are simple. You're going to need a blank piece of paper, pencil, eraser, and a sharpener. To begin with, start with your pencil in the long grip. I like to use this magic wand type grip right there. And in the center of your paper, draw a circle that's got a diameter of about 3 inches. Okay. And then draw a midline, a vertical midline through the center of that circle. All right. Now from the left and right sides of the circle, draw 2 lines going straight down. Okay, we're starting to map out the overall, the overall outlines of the face. Okay. Now starting from the approximate center point of the circle here, make 2 marks so you can approximate the radius of the circle. Okay. That same radius, you want to bring it down over here to the approximate same length. Okay, this is going to be the bottom of the chin. And draw a small horizontal line right there. Now at this point, you're going to draw 2 diagonal lines. Okay, make sure they're symmetrical on each side, and this is to sketch in the jawline. So there we have the overall outlines of a human head to begin with. And everything you're drawing at this stage particularly wants to be rough, light lines. That's why we're holding our pencil like this. Okay. Now, if you take a look at your own face in the mirror, right, what you'll notice is that between the top of your head and the bottom of your chin, if you kind of look at what facial features lie right in the middle, that's approximately where your eye line's going to be at. Okay, so the midpoint between the top of your skull and the bottom of your chin, that's the eye line. So let's map that out. Top of the skull to the bottom of the chin, at the approximate midpoint over here, you could sketch in a horizontal line, just like that. That's the eye line. Now let's start splitting things up between the eye line and the bottom of the chin. From the eye line over here to the bottom of the chin, what's approximately in the middle of that is the tip of the nose. Okay, so we want to take advantage of that between the eye line and the bottom of the chin at approximately the middle point. I'm going to draw just a small horizontal line, right, like that. Let's go further down between the tip of the nose and the bottom of the chin. What's in between there, just about approximately, is about halfway, is the lips. Okay, so right here, just about there. I would say a little bit above the halfway point. Okay. Now we can start to, now that we have the eye line, the line for the tip of the nose, or the approximate tip, and the parting of the lips, we can start to get a little more granular. Determine how wide you want your nose to be. Okay, I'm going to make mine about just a little less than 1 inch long. And then at the left and right sides of that line that you're mapped out for your nose, draw 2 vertical lines, just like that. The eyes are going to fall on either side of these intersections, and the width of the entire eye is going to be the same as the width of the whole nose. Okay, so this length right here. This length right here. Okay, so this is between this point and that point is my right eye. Between this point and that point is where my left eye is going to be. Okay, so these are equidistant, 1, 2, and 3. All right. So let's start to add in the geometry of the eyes themselves. We're still going to stick with these straight line segments for now, still using those rough light lines. Draw a small line that's about a little less than 45 degrees, like that. And then sloping slightly down from that point. Okay, draw another line segment and then bring that down towards the right side where you want that's the edge, that's the point of the eye. So the top eyelid should be broken down into these three segments. 1, 2, 3 planes. Okay, and the highest point should be right over here. That's the peak. The bottom eyelid should be mapped out with 2 planes, 2 line segments. One coming in about there, and then finishing up like that. This point right over here should be the lowest point. Okay, so these are just approximate geometries. What I would stray away from is the basic 2 C-shaped curve eye. Okay, this won't get you a natural looking eye. This will get you a lot closer using these planes and making sure that the peak is over here and the lowest point is right over there. Okay. I want to do everything we can to upgrade our skills. Repeat the same process on the left side now, and do your very best to get these eyes symmetrical on both sides. Still right over here, that point should be the highest for the top of the eyelid, right? And it's made up of 1, 2, 3 segments. The bottom eyelid is coming in this way. This is the lowest point. It's made up of two segments, like that. Okay. Now for the tip of the nose, tip I have for you is to start with a shallow M shape. Okay. Start with a V shape, sort of like this, and then bring it down toward both ends, kind of like a shallow M. Okay. Add 2 small segments that look like that. And this, you've got the bottom plane of your nose, okay, where you can see the nostrils kind of come out on both sides. You can double this up. Again, we're keeping on using the light lines. Okay, everything is still very rough. And you can add a second small line segments over here and there, and right over here, to map out the general location of the nostrils and where they're going to go. From these points over here, draw some diagonal lines going up to the bridge of the nose. Okay. And then on the outside of the nostrils, you can draw these shapes, just like that. Okay. These are like the sides of your nostrils going up into the chamber of the nose here. You can finish off the sides of the nose, like that. And we can leave it at that for now. For the lips, this is the general overall, or the approximate location of the parting of the lips. Start with a small V, and then extend it out toward the edges of the lip. Also like an M shape, except the left and right side is much longer. Okay. Approximately the center point of the eye coming down at a slight angle. That's where you want the corners of the lips to lie. Okay. The bottom of the lower lip, you could just map in with a line like this. come up to meet the corners of the mouth. And then there's another V shape above the top lip, as well as these two lines that meet up with the center point, the center section of the nose. And then from here, you could bring these in an upside down V to meet up with the corner of the mouth, okay? Next, let's go to the brow. Starting at this point, we want to imagine breaking up the brow into these planes that fan out from this middle bridge of the nose, okay? So I'm imagining these to be kind of polygonal shapes and planes. So I can map out and imagine that this is the underside of the brow that's wrapping around, okay? You could try to make this as symmetrical as possible on both sides. And then right along the top edge of these planes, that's where you'd have your eyebrow, okay? The eyebrows, they start off thicker toward the middle, and they'd be broken down into 3 planes as well. 1, 2, 3. Kind of like the top of the eye, okay? So they're thicker in the middle, they get thinner towards the end in general. As a general rule, if you're drawing a face with male features, the eyebrows tend to be a little thicker. The brow itself tends to be a little more large, whereas a female face tends to have slightly thinner eyebrows, but not by much. Okay. So the face is coming together on the inside. Let's put in a little bit more work on the outside lines of the face, particularly the jawline. Okay. We have cheekbones that kind of hold up the structure on the sides, and you can draw in a diagonal line like this and something close to a vertical line like that to map out where the cheekbones are. Okay. And right over here, the cheekbones kind of rotate up and wrap around to the top side of the brow, like this. Okay. Right about over here, a little bit after this, these bends right there, draw some vertical lines like this, and then wrap it around to define the top of the cranium. Okay. So we're taking, we took that initial circle and we're breaking it up into these planes and line segments. So what you saw me do there was I noticed that the 2 cheekbones were a little asymmetrical, so I moved this one slightly down. Now jogging in a little bit from this bend right there, starting at about this point, I'm bringing down a line that's close to vertical. Okay, and then you can determine for yourself where the bend of the jaw is. Okay, and right about here, I'm adding in another jog, right? Another line segment that's intersecting like that to define the protrusive chin a little more. I can repeat that on the right side. Okie doke. So now we're beginning to have a face with a little more overall structure. The brow on the top, kind of front side of the skull would come around a little bit like that. Okay. You can make adjustments to this to your liking. If you want a slightly thinner nose or slightly smaller eyes, totally good. Okay. Suggestion I got for you, and you might pause the video to do this. Okay. If you are noticing that something's slightly off, but you don't quite know what, your eyes are probably detecting some kind of abnormality in terms of symmetry. Okay. If you take this paper off, flip it backwards and hold it up to a light, or hold it, look at it in a mirror, your eyes will quickly be able to tell, okay, oh, okay, the whatever's off, like the right eye might need to come in a little more, something might be a little larger on one side. But looking at the back side or the reflection of it really helps to notice that quicker. Okay. All right. So we're going to continue with, now that we have the overall mapping done, right? Let's continue with detailing this in, starting with the upper eyelid. We're going to double up these 3 line segments to begin with. Okay. Just double those up. Like so. The actual eyeballs, they should not be full and complete circles. Okay, it should be a portion of the circle, like that. Just map those in as symmetrically as you can. And then these lines that we doubled up, you can go ahead and lightly shade those in for now. We're going to light this face in a similar angle to the example that I showed. Light's coming in from about this direction, hitting all these planes and casting a shadow, the form shadow, on the left side over here. Okay? But the overall direction is that the light's coming from above. And that's why the underside of the eyelid is dark, okay? Because the light's coming in and it's not hitting this particular portion of the eyelid. The opposite case is true for the inner eyelid of the bottom side, okay? So that's why we do not want to shade this in the same way. Let's leave the eyes there and think about the bottom plane of the nose. Again, light's generally coming in from the top side. So you're going to roughly shade in this plane, right? That we began shaping out with that initial M shape. But this is all not being hit by the light. You're going to start to lose detail in the nostrils. So before we forget where they are, go ahead and shade those little parallelograms in. Okay. If light's coming down and also diagonally, the left side of the nose is also going to be having some sort of form shadow, right? And this is another big benefit to having drawn these facial features out in terms of imagining them as a series of flat planes, right? So we get a little better idea of the topology over here. So the left side of the nose is going to be in shadow, and that shadow is going to extend out to the left side of the brow over here, the beginning part of it, as well as the underside of the eyebrow. So you can start shading these in, and you can keep them all at the same level of darkness for now. the eyeball itself is within a socket, right? But the left side of this generally spherical eyeball is also going to be in shadow. Okay. And some light is going to catch on the top side of that eyelid. You can actually extend the shadow down towards the tear duct. Okay. The nose itself, the actual nose, is going to cast a shadow on this portion of the chin. So you could draw a light line in this direction. And the entire face is going to have a form shadow on the left side. So we're going to leave this area light and then start shading things in from over here. And for now, especially as you're shading, start light, or at the very least medium in terms of your level of darkness. Because if you do want to make it darker, it's always best to layer them in multiple smooth layers rather than trying to make it dark immediately. Okay, you'll get a much better result. Beyond this cheekbone over here, it's going to be slightly darker. So while I am pressing slightly harder, I'm making sure to make the shaded value I'm putting down as smooth as possible, without scratchiness, that sort of thing. Okay. So I'm going to extend this shadow a little bit over here and just terminate it right about there. The underside of the brow over here is also going to be in shadow, but it's not going to wrap around the nose the same way that we see on the left side. Okay, the brow does cast a shadow, but right about the point where it gets there, it lightens up. Okay, because light's coming in from this way and hidden mostly on these planes of the nose. Over here is going to be super light shading. Okay, definitely not nearly as dark as this side. This little point between the brow and under the glabella is going to be slightly darker than pure white. Okay, because we're essentially looking at a portion of the nose that goes like this before it jogs back out to the ridge of the nose. So if light's coming in this way, it's slightly darker on in that face. That's what we're mapping out over here. Okay, so we're shaping up in terms of the rough shading. Okay, the shadow that the nose casts also goes over a portion of the upper this area above the upper lip. Okay, the cast shadow is going to do something like this, jog down into this little valley and pretty much start covering this whole side of the upper lip. Now, what you might start to see, like I'm starting to notice here, is values are starting to kind of melt together. I'm starting to lose a little bit of detail. Don't worry about that too much. I'm going to show you how to redefine certain features by going in there with some detailed shading. Like over here, right over here, I want to preserve that little line, but instead of just drawing it as a line, I'm going to bring in slightly darker shading and lightly blend it out. Okay. Same over here. I don't want to lose the definition of the nose itself, but I'm not drawing lines here. I'm doing my best to delineate everything as different areas of value. Okay, edges should be defined as much as possible as two different areas of value contrasting. Okay, let's keep wrapping around the face. If light's coming in this direction, the top lip is also going to be in shadow. For a similar principle as what we're talking about over here. Okay, the top lip does this in profile, and the bottom lip looks like this. So light coming in from this direction, it's not going to hit the surface. It is going to hit the top surface of the bottom lip though. So that's how you want to understand this and the reasoning why these shadows are where they're at. So the top lip is going to be dark like that. And again, you can add a little bit of detail, occlusion shading, occlusion shadows over here for the parting of the lips. Occlusion shadow, guys, is it's the shadow that where light cannot reach because it's in like a deep recess or a corner. So like I said, the top portion of the bottom lip is going to be lit. However, the bottom side and towards the left is going to be in shadow. So you can map that out like that. And the bottom lip itself is going to cast a small shadow over the top portion of the chin. Okay, so I'm going to include that as well. Now, fully wrap it around. The shadow is going to wrap around this portion. Light's going to hit this portion of the chin, but the bottom portion of the chin is going to be in a thin shadow like so. Okay. And then that shadow kind of gets thinner and thinner as it wraps around the face like that. The cheekbone over here is going to be slightly darker in terms of, it's like kind of like contouring in makeup, but not as dark as this place, all right? I actually made this a little bit too dark, so I'm going to use my kneaded eraser to even it out a little bit. Okay. Now this top side where we see the brow, the left portion of it is also going to be in shadow. Comes up like this. And the left portion of the cranium is also going to be in the dark. Okay. So there you have a face that's with the features mapped out and the overall areas of dark and light mapped out. Okay. From this point on, we're going to go ahead and get deeper into the finer details. Okay, but we're talking about the pupils, right? We're talking about the eyebrows and the hairs themselves. We're going to add some actual hair on top of the head, and some of these sharper lines we can kind of start to smooth them out. Okay, but the finer details, like I just talked about, I would definitely leave them until you have this overall mapping. It's important to work from the largest, roughest lines down to before you get to any of the hard lines. These are for like small details. Okay. So let's go back to the eyes. Map out some smaller circles. These are the pupils. And since light's coming in from over here, there's going to be even tinier circle showing the reflected light. And that tiny circle, we are not going to put any shading in. These are meant to be as pure white as we can keep it. Okay. The pupil itself is quite dark, but leave a little crescent out of it to show that there's reflected light. Also, in terms of the whites of the eye, they're actually not purely white. We need to understand them as spherical objects. And in a spherical object, when light's coming in from this direction, there is going to be a shadow like this. It's not going to be super dark, but this portion in the whites of the eye towards the left and on the bottom, they're going to be a little bit gray, particularly on this left side eye. Okay, not as much, not as pronounced on the right side, because more light is being received, but the bottom portion of the eyes do want to be in some shadow like that. Some finer details. Lightly draw in a double line to show a portion of the bottom eyelid being illuminated, right? And you can add a very, very light shadow right there. Okay. If I were to explain the reasoning behind why we add this is, if this is the eyeball in side view, the eyelid on the bottom side looks like this. If light's coming in, this top portion is getting hit with some light, so you'll get a very subtle halo. Okay. I'm going to do the same on this side. Should be very, very light though. Okay. Like we treated the left side of the eyeball with over here, there is going to be a mid-tone shadow, a mid-tone over here on the left side of this eye. Okay. Not as dark as you see over here, but it is also a spherical object. So the left side of it is going to be slightly darker. You can erase some of these construction lines that we use to map out the initial features. So let's add in some hairs for the eyebrow. Common mistake to make drawing the eyebrows to draw the hairs as like a straight zigzag. Okay, the hairs in the eyebrow actually have a direction to them. Okay, that slowly gets more and more pronounced and more shallow as you go toward the outermost sides, and eventually it's an overall S shape. You might want to lighten up some of the line segments you use to map them out, and use a flicking method like you see me doing here. Use a flicking kind of motion, and don't make the spacing too regular, right? That makes things look a little too mechanical. And also, as you go toward the right and intermittently in between, vary the length of your stroke. Okay. Some should be a little bit longer, some should be a little farther away from each other, some should be kind of short. And as you go to the right side, the direction of the eyebrow kind of tapers off. And do this a couple times, maybe twice or 3 times, so that you get a little bit of layering. Okay. And you can shade in a small portion of it, but lightly. Okay, you want to preserve the look of there actually being hairs and that sort of texture to it. And like we always do, we have 2 sides to our face, so go ahead, repeat that on the left side, keeping things as symmetrical as you can. And again, the angle of the hairs get more and more shallow as you go toward the left. Now we can start to darken in certain portions just a little bit, like the parting of the lips and the interior of the nostrils. And what you might find is as you add in those darker portions, you might want to darken in and add in some smoothing layers to some of these planes, like the bottom side of the nose, also the left side over here. The inside of the brow, right before it gets to the eye. I think I want to provide a little more contrast there. And just in case you haven't noticed, I haven't touched a blending stump or anything. Okay. Not that I'm against using those tools, it's a great tool, and I actually really enjoy using it. It's really important to learn how to shade as smoothly as you can and as accurately as you can before you go to the blending stump. Okay, the blending stump, it's like icing on the cake. Ideally, it should be used like that. Okay, instead of at least in these situations where you're kind of step by step, layer by layer, mapping out the dark values and the medium values and the highlights. It's only once you've got a pretty good resolution, right? Like a solid direction with that you want to start bringing in those finer tools. Okay. So I just went ahead and added kind of a second smoothing layer that helped to darken in the shadows on the left side of the face. And you want to go ahead and do the same. One of the other common mistakes to make is people want to add a whole lot of detail to the eye because it's oftentimes considered the most important, the most interesting part of the face, right? When in fact, you want to keep the level of detail consistent all throughout. Okay? So I'm not going in there trying to add in these fine like eyelashes or anything like that. I'm just letting the darker value off the top of the eyelid do the work for me, you know, and the human eye in observation will kind of fill in those gaps. Speaking of details, you can add a small line over here to indicate the kind of double eyelid right above that top side eyelid. Let's see. You can add in a little bit of texturing on the lip, particularly on this top side. And then for the bottom lip, we don't want to darken it in a whole lot, but you can add in small amounts of very light shading to show the kind of texture of the lip and the sort of tiny wrinkles that would be there. Sort of like I guess sort of like a slice of an orange, you know, kind of this is like sort of adding in the pulp. Also, I'm not worrying yet about blending much of these edges. I'm just letting it be light highlight, just paper white, versus fairly medium gray right there, instead of trying to like, what I mean is the transitioning and the smoothing out into a gradient like this, you can decide on that later after you've mapped out the overall planes and the overall areas of darkness and shadow as accurately as you can. Okay. Now let's see, what else can we do here? Oh, I forgot the ears. Let's give this person some ears. These are approximate as well, but the eye line and the tip of the nose, the ears exist within these dimensions. Okay, so for the top of the ear, you can do a small V, wrap that around, kind of like so. This line is almost vertical, and then another tiny diagonal line like that. Okay, let's repeat the step. First, you want to map out, here was the eye line, there's about the tip of the nose, small V, diagonal line coming down, almost a vertical line, and coming in. The ear on the left side is going to be pretty much fully in shadow, so I'm going to shade it in so that we see its silhouette, but it's going to be the same level of darkness as the left side of the face. Okay, we're going to see a little bit more detail on the right side, but most of it is going to be hidden. Okay, just small amounts of shadow to show a little bit of dimension, but not a lot of detail at all. The lower side of the lobe should be darker, slightly. But in a frontal view like this, the ears aren't super visible. Now, let's finish off the eyes. You can keep the eyes and the irises, meaning the areas right around the pupils, you can keep them light like this if you want to. I sometimes like to do that. However, if you want your particular person here that you're drawing to have a certain color eye, I'd recommend you use this kind of stroke direction that radiates out from the center of the eye. And try to keep some light area on the top right portion of the eye, since light is coming in here. If you darken in the entire iris, it usually makes the person kind of look sort of like unnatural, and you want to indicate like that the person has a literal light in the eye that's reflecting back to you. Okay. All right, so this person's bald. I think we should give this person some hair. Okay. The hairline is going to depend, right? But it's about from the brow point over here to the top of the skull in this view. I would say it's about 2/3 of the way up. Obviously, if someone's balding, it's actually higher, right? Well, let's put it about here, and if you lightly draw in a line going this way but slightly curving, right? It's kind of like curving upwards a little. That's the hairline, and you could bring it down and jog it back to the side of the head like so. This next one kind of depends on the hairstyle, but there's volume to hair. It doesn't stick right to the top of the cranium. So you want to take account of that. I'm going to give this person like a spike haircut. And to begin with, I'm going to begin with the overall outline, the rough outline, I mean. Let's see. I think I want it to sort of wave toward the right side, but taper down like a faux hawk. But there's distance between the top of the cranium and the top of the hairdo, right? As far as rendering hair goes, the hairline wants to look like it's got some variation in it. And I'm using a similar kind of flicking stroke, varying the length of my line as I work across this, this hairline. And by the time you get over here, the hair actually goes in this direction, towards the side, kind of curving, okay? You can start to use longer, more bolder strokes after you define the hairline to flesh out where the front side of this hairstyle is going to be the forwardmost pieces of hair. Okay. The left side of the hair is also going to be in shadow, but the planes aren't going to be as defined as what you see in the face, the skin portion of the face itself. Okay. You're going to want to use these flicking strokes as much as you can to kind of kill two birds at one stone. You're defining the value by darkening it in, and you're adding some texture to the hair. And then slightly lighter on the right side. Okay, so there you have kind of the rough beginnings of how to construct a human face from the some overall proportions that we can be aware of, and begin to map in the different planes of the face and how it reacts to light, depending on where you want that, what direction you want that light to be coming from. If you want to add a neck to this guy, it'll be slightly in from this change in direction right there, these 2 points, just slightly in. You could draw a line that's pretty much vertical, but not too long. And these are the traps, okay? Trapezius muscles, and it levels out to the shoulder pretty soon after that. Light coming in this way would cast a shadow over the underside of the neck and over part of the trap, and maybe even over the shoulder right here. This you'd be able to shade in. You just got to make sure it's darker, so than the shading that's on the underside of the chin, so that you don't lose that that edge condition right there. It's really important in shading to avoid making everything pretty much like, to make everything the same or more or less the same shade of gray is the usual common problem when for somebody who's like unfamiliar with the process. You got to have contrast. Okay, it's one of the best ways. This is for sure one of the best ways to practice with that principle of design contrast is to use value and shading. Kind of wrapping up over here, so I'm going to keep this portion a little rougher. Not as smooth as what I have up top, but I'm okay with it for just this portion. Sometimes I like to intentionally keep certain parts of a drawing a little rougher. I allow myself to have some more zigzag textures here. It's a different kind of contrast, I suppose. However, like I said, the important part is this shading, this shadow over here should be visibly darker than the bottom side of the chin. Okay. All right, guys. Hope you enjoyed that, and hope you learned something valuable for yourself. It's a really useful thing to be able to generate a face from your imagination. It helps a lot to do that, being aware of some of the rough kind of measurements. If you need a reminder of what those are, there they are over here. Top of the skull to the bottom of the chin. Halfway point is the eyes. Halfway point between the eyes and the bottom of the chin approximately is the nose. Halfway again from the nose to the chin, that's where about the lips are. Okay? Being able to generate it like that actually helps a lot in drawing a person's face from reference or from life as well. Okay? All right, guys. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in class.